Hi, and good afternoon. Thank you so much for tuning in to our afternoon session of Dispelling Myths of DCYF. I'm joined here with Patricia Carbonaro. She is from the Keene office, and we're so excited to share with you, what she does for her work with DCYF and also what DCYF does across the state of New Hampshire and how they're here to support children, youth, and families. We want to give people just a second to get the notification and to join our conversation this afternoon. And while we do that, I want to remind everybody that you can follow our social media accounts. We're here on YouTube, we have Facebook, Twitter, and we also have a resource website as well, nhstudentwellness.com. I want to encourage everybody to post any questions you have about DCYF in the chat, and we will get to them at the end of Patricia's talk about DCYF. And I also want to encourage you to, on our social media, you can find our book club. Each week during the summer, we're going to be reading a book and then discussing it as a group. So you can find the registration link there, and I'll post it in the chat in a little bit as well. So like I said, I have Patricia Carbonaro here with me. She is the District Office Supervisor of Child Protection from the Keene Department of Children, Youth, and Families. Patricia, would you like to say something?
Good afternoon, everybody. I am so happy to be here, and I am hoping that I can dispel some myths for you. So please get your questions in. If you have a question for me, I'm happy to answer it.
Absolutely. And I just want to remind people as they're thinking about questions that Patricia will not be able to cover any specific circumstances or specific events, but she can answer general questions about DCYF, what they do, and the job of their department.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. Want me to jump in?
Absolutely. We would love it.
Okay. So I prefer to be called Patty. Patricia makes me think that I'm in big trouble. And I've been in trouble a lot, but so we'll go with Patty today. I have been with DCYF since 1989. I have held many different roles at DCYF. I started as the teen independent living worker. I became an intake worker where I accepted phone calls that were making allegations of abuse or neglect. I was an investigator, and I investigated calls of abuse and neglect. And I was a long-term care holder. I managed cases. If it was determined that a family needed more services than just during an investigation, I managed long ongoing cases. I'm also been an assistant supervisor, and now I'm the head supervisor of the Keene office. So for those of you who don't like math, yes, I have been with the division for over 30 years. It's kind of scary. I love my job. I love working for DCYF. I am so excited to be here trying to dispel some of the myths of DCYF. We are an agency that really likes to offer services and resources to families. Yes, do we have to do that sometimes when a family doesn't really want to be involved with us? Or it's not just a voluntary situation? Absolutely, because we are charged with the protection of children. That's our job, first and foremost, is child protection. So what I'd like to do today is start out with what happens when someone makes a call to our intake line. And then I'll walk through that, and then we will open it up for questions after I've sort of given you an idea of how things work. So in the state of New Hampshire, everybody is a mandated reporter. That means grandma at the grocery store, if she sees something that she suspects is abuse and neglect, it is her duty to make a call to the intake hotline and report that she suspects abuse and neglect is happening. Does she have to know all of the information about a family when she makes that call? No, she might have a description of that family that matches a description that someone else in the grocery store also called in, and someone else might have gotten a license plate. So we can figure out who that family is. You don't have to know everything about the family to make a call if you suspect abuse or neglect. In some states, the only people who have to make reports are professional reporters, doctors, nurses, teachers. So like I said, in the state of New Hampshire, everybody is a mandated reporter. There's an intake hotline, and I will share that with Molly, and she can share that with everybody so that you know the number. When you make a call to intake, there are a lot of people behind phones. I think there's now 12 intake workers and several supervisors. They are on their phones all day long from 8 to 4:30, at least the crew that I work with. They take every call that comes in. Sometimes when you make a phone, okay, well, let me start with this. When you make that phone call, be prepared to answer a lot of questions. It's okay if you don't know the answers, but you're going to be asked addresses, phone numbers, who lives in the home, how old people are there any extra people living in the home? Are there weapons? Is there substance abuse? Is there domestic violence? Do they have dogs? Believe it or not, social workers are pretty afraid of dogs. So there's all kinds of questions that you may be asked. And like I said, you don't have to know the answers, but don't be surprised when you get asked all of those questions. If you are a professional and you have a file on a family, or if you have all that information, it's good to have it ready and at your hands when you make the phone call. So we use what is called a structured decision-making tool. When you make a phone call and provide us with information, the workers behind the scenes are taking that information and using a tool that helps them move forward. So for example, if you say there's a 2-year-old in a home with substance abuse and weapons, that is going to come into us at a pretty high risk because it's a child under a certain age. There's a weapon we don't know a whole lot about. And substance abuse puts an adult at risk to possibly use that weapon in a not safe manner. So it might be that when they're looking at this tool, it says, is the child 3 or under? And they'll say yes. And then that might send them to the next box, which says, are there 2 caregivers in the home? Do we know if one is sober? And it helps them, and it goes all the way through all of the information that's given to help them make a determination as to whether or not, 1, we're going to do an investigation, or 2, how quickly the office staff at the district office it is sent to makes a response. So we're going to say that once a call gets called in, well, there's three things that can happen when a call is made to our intake line. 1, it becomes a screen out, which means there wasn't enough information for that to be moved on to a district office. But that phone, the person who answers that phone is going to make referrals or help that whoever's made that call find resources for the family, or make suggestions about where that family could turn, or how the person who's reporting that information could help the family. A second thing that could happen is that it could come down to our office for an investigation, or to any office across the state for an investigation. The third thing that could happen is that information might be something that needs to be referred on to juvenile probation and parole. It might be information that is something that is already needs to be handed off to a juvenile probation and parole officer who already has an open case, or it might be something that is added to information on a juvenile probation and parole referral, and it would go to them. So if it's determined that a call needs to be sent down to an office to have an investigation or an assessment, you will hear me use those words interchangeably. Investigation is what it is. We investigate, we ask questions, we call people, we call police departments, we call doctors, we call people that families ask us to call to discuss their family. But what we're doing is we're assessing the safety of the children in the home. So I will call it an investigation or an assessment interchangeably throughout our conversation. Investigation sounds a little scarier than assessment. So we sort of go back and forth with our language, even in our own office. We really try and work hard to be respectful of families. We don't want to be scary. We don't want to come charging in like the police with a uniform on and we're going to investigate this situation. We want to assess the situation. We want to make sure that the children are safe and that the family has what they need to help keep children safe and be successful in their community. When there's Three, I hem and haw a little bit, and I apologize about that. We are in the process of making all kinds of changes to our work. And so I need to make sure that I'm giving you what we're doing now and not something new that's coming down the road that you're going to be like, you're not doing that, or something that we've done in the past that we still don't do. So I hem and haw a little bit to make sure I'm giving you good information. Currently, when an investigation gets sent to our office, it comes down in three different ways. It could come as a level 1, a 2, or a 3. A level 1 means we need to respond within 24 hours to that situation. It's a pretty urgent situation. It doesn't mean that we wait 24 hours to go out on that call. If that lands in our office and we read it, we might respond immediately. It really depends on the information and what we need to gather to make sure that we're making an informed response to a home. A level 2 means we respond within 48 hours, and a level 3 means we respond within 72. That is changing in the future, and I don't know exactly how that is going to change, but I have a feeling that we'll have a quicker response time and not such a long 72-hour opportunity for a response.
Can I ask?
Absolutely.
Can I ask who, or I guess how do you decide between a level 1, 2, and 3, or who makes that call and when?
The intake office makes that decision, and that is also based off that structured decision-making tool of the age of the child, the allegations that are made, is there an appropriate caregiver, is there someone to protect the child? All of those things are looked at when the decision is made. I will tell you, substance abuse and weapons generally make it a level 1, a high-risk situation that we're going to respond to pretty quickly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is that evaluation made right on the phone when a report is being made, or is it made subsequently after?
It is sometimes we're getting phone calls while an intake worker is still on the line with the reporter. They think it's a high risk enough situation that they want us working on it immediately. And sometimes the decision is made after the intake worker hangs up and they talk to their supervisor. So it depends on the information that's coming in. But it usually is a fairly quick decision at the intake level. So once that's at our office, the referral's at our office, and we cover all of Cheshire County and Keene and parts of Hillsborough County. So we have a pretty big catchment area, which is pretty typical of most offices across the state other than Manchester that covers the town or city of Manchester. That is what they cover. It's such a big space and there's so much to cover. They don't have any outlying towns, but most every office has a good number of towns that they cover. And so there's a lot of traveling involved, and in every assessment that comes down to our office, we make a determination as to whether or not we include law enforcement. By law, we are required in certain situations to report to them, and we are required to do a joint investigation. And that is whenever there could be a crime committed against a child. So specifically, a very severe physical abuse like a broken bone, fractured skull, something like that, or a sexual abuse allegation, we are doing a joint investigation with the police. That is very important because there could be criminal allegations or crimes that could be charged against the perpetrator. Sometimes we involve police because we hear it's a scary house to go to, or we've been threatened by the person's home that we're going to. Most of the time, we don't need the police to be involved. We don't want to be intrusive more than we have to already be intrusive. We're a very intrusive agency. We knock on your door and we question parenting. We are coming in there saying, someone thinks you're abusive or neglectful. So the least intrusive we can be is the most respectful thing that we can do for a family. And that's really the way we want to work. But we do knock on doors with police officers in uniforms with us sometimes, and that's sort of the nature of the beast in how things work for our agency. So that is one piece of the assessment. The other piece that workers do before they go out to families is they try and read any history that we have with them. We want to know if you've been involved with us before and it's the same allegations, maybe it's already been investigated. Maybe it's already been looked at and it's something that we don't have to do again. And we don't have to call the family, or we can call the family and they might say to us, you guys were out here last year. We've already done this. We can review that and look at it. And then maybe we don't have to do it again. Or maybe if there's a new piece of information and we do have to look at it again. But we look at our past history, the workers sit with their supervisors, and we try and decide what the best course of action is in this particular assessment. Most of the time, it's just making a phone call to somebody, to the parent who, or whoever's the most appropriate phone call to make a phone call. This is Patty from DCYF. I need to let you know a call of concern has come in with regard to you and your children. Is this a good time to talk? And then we start the conversation. Can we come out to your home? Can we visit with you and your kids? Can we interview your kids without you present? Do you have any other people living in your home? The other thing that we ask is, are there other people that we can speak to that could comment on your parenting or your relationship with your children or how you manage your children? And sometimes we get relatives, we call those collateral contacts. You'll hear workers all the time. I need to call collaterals, or do you have any collaterals I can call? And sometimes I remind my staff, do the people you're talking with know what collateral means? Yeah. Do they know what a collateral is? You need to explain to them what collaterals are, because we just get so used to our language and acronyms. And if I use any language or acronyms that you do not know or that you need to know, please let me know and I'd be happy to share them with you.
Thank you.
So once all of that, once we make a phone call to the family, or make a decision that we're not going to make a phone call to a family before we go out, which is, those don't happen as often as people think, or as often as people would like. People would love us to go out unannounced, because then we can, in my little finger quotes here, catch people doing something wrong or see how dirty and gross their house is. Well, quite frankly, when we make a phone call to a family, they're probably going to start cleaning up their house. And that's really what we want them to do. We want them to clean up the house before we get there, because in essence, we want them to clean the house if it's really that much of a safety hazard. So we try and not do that, because again, not very respectful to people to just show up at someone's house and knock on the door. So like I said, when we talk to a family, when we see a family, we need to see all the kids. We need to talk to all the adults that live there. We like to interview children in their homes, but there are certain situations where we will not interview children in their homes. And we will take them to a public space. And that is if there's sexual abuse in the allegations. That's not okay to do to a kid, is to interview them in a place where they may have been sexually abused. So we will not interview in the home. If there is a specific sexual abuse allegation or a severe physical, like a broken bone or a burn, something like that, our interviews are done at the Child Advocacy Center. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. That's just a little bit of a different piece of work that we do. But if we are not at the Child Advocacy Center and we are not interviewing children at home, the law says that we have to videotape them. So if a child comes to our office, or if we meet at a parent's work, or we interview a child at school, we have to videotape them. That is the law. And we will, we let people know that we have videotaped, so parents are aware that that has happened. We also do not need parents' permission to interview children. That is in the law. We do, however, and I can't give you a percentage of the time because I don't know, but it is the majority of the time, tell parents that we are going to interview their children. We do not do it without their permission. If we have a parent that we've had 4 investigations on in 6 months, and they've declined us the ability to see their child or to talk to them, that's probably a family we're going to either show up unannounced, or we're going to go to a school and see children and interview them without parents' permission. And so we really try and reserve those kinds of things to cases where we're very concerned about safety, but we have no way to assess it. In the state of New Hampshire, parents have the right to say no thank you to DCYF. There is what we call a family rights brochure, and we share that with families, but they have the right to say that no, we cannot talk with them and we cannot talk with their children. And then we have to get a court order if we feel it's necessary to do so to assess the safety of that child. Our assessments or investigations last 60 days. If you know anything about DCYF or you watch the news, you've probably heard a lot about what we call overdues, which means our assessments and investigations have gone past the 60-day mark. And that's because it's been very difficult to get them closed within 60 days. We are working very hard to get that done because when a family's told that an investigation lasts 60 days, it shouldn't go more than 60 days, but sometimes they do. During that 60 days, we are meeting with the family and all of the children in that family. We are calling those collaterals and talking to them and getting their insight on the family, what their thoughts are. We're probably calling the police department where a family lives. And we are gathering as much information as possible to make informed decisions. If a child sees a therapist, we probably want to have a release to talk to that child's therapist. If parents are using medicated assisted treatment and are going to a clinic somewhere, we're probably going to want a release to be able to talk to them and ensure that a parent is doing their substance abuse treatment and following through on what they need to do. But it's different for every family. And we decide what collaterals we need to call after we've talked to the family and spoken with them so that we pick the right ones. Let's see. So when assessment workers have gathered all that information, it's time to make a decision about what happens with an investigation. So it might be that we decide it's unfounded. That does not mean we don't have concerns about the family. What it means is we don't have enough information to move forward with the family, like go to court or open a case. And so a family will get a letter from us that says something to the effect of, the assessment regarding your family, and we'll list out the names, is being closed as unfounded. And we thank you for your participation, but we'd like to make some suggestions. So maybe you could get your children into counseling, or you could use the food pantry, or maybe you could talk to housing about how you're going to get your rent up to date. So we make suggestions to people about what they could do. That way, if another investigation comes in and we have all the same things and we see this closing letter from another worker that was unfounded, making recommendations to the family, we can say to the family, so, hey, saw your last assessment was unfounded. Oh, excuse me. It's okay, Leo. Big dog and rumbling. He's not afraid of thunder, but he barks at rumbling. We will say to them, hey, and it was suggested here that you get your child counseling, or that you talk to the housing people. Did you do that? And if they say no, then we start getting, okay, so these are the kinds of things you need to do before we're going to close this assessment. Or maybe we decide it's time for this family to have some more resources, and we might need to, go to court this time with this family because now they're just not following through on recommendations that are made, and things are just not as safe as they could be in that home. Okay, just lost my train of thought there for a second. I think of too many things to try and say. So we don't just get to open cases willy-nilly. We have to go by the law. We are bound by the law. The law says that we have certain things that have to happen in order for us to open a case. And that is, we have to show harm to a child, whether it's now or in the future. We have to show that there is going to be harm to a child, or there is a child has been harmed, in order to open a case. This is where the frustration lies for a lot of people, because either we hear we don't do nearly enough, or we do way too much. But it's all bound by the law. We can't do anything without a judge. Judges make our decisions for us. So when we go to court, the judge is the one that says whether or not we get to open a case. The judge is the one who determines that services need to be put in place. A judge determines whether or not kids go home or kids don't go home. We are really bound by the law, and that's a really important. It's 169C is the child protection law. And you can see, if you have any interest in looking at it, you can see some of the things that we're bound by. So If an assessment worker decides that it needs to be opened as a case, they file petitions, they draw up an affidavit, they take it to the court. And if the judge thinks that this family needs to be involved with us, then that particular case transfers to what we call a family service worker. And this family service worker sits down with a family and talks with them about the concerns that have been brought forward and some ideas for services and resources for the family. And they create a case plan together. And that means literally at the kitchen table. Kids need to be sitting there, parents need to be sitting there. Kids are involved in planning, parents are involved in planning. You know, we've learned over the years that by walking into a family when we open a case and saying, you have an alcohol problem, you need to go to AA 4 times a week, and you need to see a LADAC 3 times a week, we've learned that that doesn't work. Not everybody can go to AA and make that work. So now when we sit down with a family, we say, okay, so you agree you have a substance abuse issue. What works for you? You know, and that parent might say, well, you know, my Uncle Billy's been sober for 10 years. He didn't like AA either, but he's made it work. Can I include Uncle Billy in my plan? And then we would call Uncle Billy and say, hey, Uncle Billy, come on over. We need you at the table because you're going to help us figure out how to keep so-and-so sober. And that works because then a family has more buy-in. The family is doing what they think is going to work for them, not what DCYF walked in and said is going to work for them. There are times when we tell people what is going to work for them, but that is probably because all of the other things that they said were going to work for them, they've tried, we've tried, hasn't worked, and now we need to take a different tact. So a lot of it is really just kind of removing barriers for people and helping them find what works best for them. So that is the start of the family service case. Family service cases are reviewed every 3 months in court. Parents are given attorneys by the court so that they are represented and they have an attorney representing them. Children are given either a guardian ad litem through the court or a CASA. A CASA is a court-appointed special advocate. Guardian ad litems and CASAs represent what is in the best interest of the child, not what the child wants, which, you know, 16 and 17-year-olds think is crazy because they think they should be able to say what they want. And they can. It just is going, the guardian ad litem or the CASA is going to represent in court what they think is in the best interest of the child. And they are in court every 3 months as well. When we go to court, the attorneys for the parents are given updates on a regular basis. The CASA and guardian ad litems sit in on our treatment team. So they meet with the families, they see the families monthly, or should be seeing the families monthly or having contact with them at least, just like our workers. In family service cases, we are required to see our families face-to-face in their homes once a month, at least. And so a case goes on, and if it's making progress, that's great. We move forward and things are going great. And then at some point we get to go to the judge and say, the family's met all their goals. They're doing great. The kids are safe. Let's celebrate and close this case and let the family go on with their lives. Sometimes we're not that lucky. Sometimes kids go into placement. Sometimes parents can't correct the conditions, and sometimes kids don't go home, and sometimes kids never get to go home. Which is very sad. And I have to tell you that is the hardest part of any social worker's job, is removing a child. It's not something we like to do. It is not enjoyable. We watch kids cry. I watch workers cry with kids. We watch parents cry. It is terrible. And it really doesn't matter what a parent has done to a child or what a child or what a parent hasn't done for a child. Parents still love their kids and kids still love their parents. And our job is not to keep them separated, but to make them a family. And sometimes we just can't do that, and we can't keep them safe. And so parental rights are sometimes terminated, and kids are adopted by other homes, by other families. Sometimes it's a relative who gets to adopt the child and the child gets permanency with. And sometimes it's a foster home, and sometimes we don't have to terminate parental rights. Sometimes parents just know that they cannot care for their kids, and they say, okay, I will sign my rights away if so-and-so can adopt my kids. And this is why it is so important that we have good foster homes and relatives and that we're working with them, because if parents can't get their stuff in a pile and be able to get their children back, and they're working with foster parents or relatives that they trust and know will take care of their kids, then they will know that their kids are safe and they'll know where their kids are for the rest of their lives, and sometimes maybe even have some contact with them. So that is the hardest part of our job, is removing kids. And then when kids can't go home, that's really tough. And we work really hard with parents on that. We are talking the day a child is removed, we are already talking about how do we get that child home. So how are we going to get the child home? What are you going to do today, Dad? We're going to take your child today, but what are you going to do to start the process? Are you going to go to that counseling appointment? Are you going to go do that drug screen for us? So those are the kinds of things that we're already starting. We talk about already the day that we are removing a child. It sounds pretty, that sounds kind of awful to be doing, but in the state of New Hampshire, parents only have 12 months to correct conditions. And if they don't correct their conditions in 12 months, that's it. And we have to move forwards towards permanency. So that's why we're pushing it, and we push it so hard and fast. There are several different things that can happen in permanency for kids. So if there's a teenager, we have an APLA goal. It's another planned permanent living arrangement. A 15-year-old who gets removed from their parents is not going to want to be adopted by another family. I'm pretty sure. Sometimes maybe, but that's very rare. And so they will not get connected with another family, but we have a lot of other things that we have to connect them with to ensure that they have all the right connections to be successful. We have guardianship with a relative. It's actually called fit and willing relative. And so a child might go that way. We have the adoption, and we have the adoption with whoever it might be, whatever the adoptive family is. And those are the main things that happen for our permanency with kids if a child is not at home with their parents or does not go home with their parents and have a case closed. And then if we do have families that adopt children from us, whether it's relatives or foster homes, if the case closes and in the future they need support and help with the child or children they've adopted, we have a post-adopt unit that helps families with those services and ensuring that they get what they need in their families.
That's wonderful. You touched on one of the big myths, which is that, DCYF is just there to take kids away. I think that's such an important point to drive home, that that's incorrect, that, from day one, you're already talking about reuniting, which is so important.
Absolutely. And families don't feel that way. We just took their kids away. They're angry. They're angry at us. And, quite frankly, I'd be angry if DCYF knocked on my door and questioned my parenting. I don't think any of us would be happy about that. Only I have the resources to be able to say, okay, you want to see what I can do? Here you go. A lot of our families just don't have that. And so it is. It's just a difficult situation.
Absolutely. You talked about resources to show, what you can do. What are some of those resources that if somebody was being faced with a DCYF worker would be really beneficial for them to be able to say, yeah, actually I can take care of my kid and here's how I do it?
If children go to daycare, sign a release for the daycare to talk to DCYF. If your child is in therapy or a child is in therapy, we don't get the nitty gritty from a therapist. Therapists don't call and say, this kid said la, 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 unless of course it's a disclosure of abuse or neglect. They just tell us that a kid's doing well or a kid's not doing well, or a parent is really participating in therapy and working really hard to meet this child's needs, but this is a really difficult child and the parent is struggling. That's really helpful, because then we don't think that a parent's being abusive or neglectful. We're hearing from a professional that someone says this parent's trying really hard, but it's a very difficult situation. Relatives that are not your best friends that are going to lie for you. Sometimes we run into that a lot, and we kind of know, who can give who. But talk to us. Are you involved with the area agency because your child has some developmental issues. Let us know that. Let us talk to them. Um, You pediatrician. Sometimes people are more involved with their pediatricians than just a well child visit, something like that. Or if a parent themselves is involved in counseling, or a parent themselves is getting some form of treatment, or some sort of resource, that's also really helpful.
Mm. So if a parent does voluntarily sign their rights away, because they know in that moment they can't take care of their children, are they ever able to get their rights back?
So interesting question. Yes and no. So there have been situations where parent's rights were terminated, and 11 years later, the parent was in a spot where they had done a lot of work. They had gotten themselves into a position where they could parent, and they wanted their child back, and the child had not been adopted by anybody. That this particular parent, they did not get their rights back, but they were able to adopt their child. So that's a little weird, but and it's the only case I've ever heard of in the 30 years that I have been with the division. But so yeah, I guess it is possible, but I'm not sure. That was an old case, and that happened like 10 years ago. So I don't know in this day and age if that would happen again.
Wow. So what, going back to the process of, reporting, what would be considered too little information for a call to be screened out that you wouldn't investigate?
Well, one thing might be that what someone is, so everyone has their own opinion of what abuse and neglect is. So let me think of something. Well, let me preface with this. In the state of New Hampshire, you can leave a bruise on your child and it is not considered abuse or neglect. We have to show a pattern of abuse or neglect. So anything where there's a mark or something like that with regard to physical abuse, a child's been slapped, those are all going to get taken in. Even if it might not be abuse, we're going to help provide information to families to learn how to not do physical discipline. But what is harder for people is the dirty house, tons of dirty houses. So the difference is you might come to my house on Thursday and think I need a referral because it's Thursday and I haven't done anything all week in my house because I've been working. But my idea of what is okay and safe for a child is very different than one of my assistant supervisors whose house is never not spotless. I don't know how she does it. I think she has little fairies maybe to clean her house every day for her. But so her idea probably of what a neglecty looking house looks like versus my house that has goats and chickens and kids and everybody under the sun just comes to this house every day. I tolerate a whole lot more in a dirty house than she might. So we might have people who are out there going into homes saying, oh my gosh, this house is so bad. It's dirty. It's not, so there's never too little information. If you suspect abuse or neglect, you make a phone call and then you let everyone else decide that, because your idea of what might be safe or not safe is different than what my idea of safe or unsafe might be. We talk about this I live in farm country, so it's not uncommon to see 11-year-old driving a tractor. If you went to Manchester, I bet there's 30 people right there who are calling in a report because there's an 11-year-old on a tractor. And I'm laughing because the field needs to get plowed because our farms are so poor that mom and dad had to go to work. So yeah, it's like, I don't want you to worry about what you think is too little. If you suspect abuse or neglect, you make a phone call and let everyone else make that decision for you.
That's an important point. What if somebody said, oh, they already reported that? Should the other party then not report or?
Nope, report it. Report it. If you have the knowledge, it's your job to report it.
Okay. Is there ever a time where you could report together if somebody is uncomfortable reporting on their own?
Absolutely. So I guess apparently there's mixed reviews on this. My opinion is If you're uncomfortable reporting and you want to sit with your best friend or whoever, the teacher's aide in your room, or whoever you want to report that information and it's not breaching confidentiality, report it and report together. Intake might say to you that that other person's going to need to call, but you can give all of your information and do everything together. That is perfectly fine. And most of the time, my understanding is they're still doing it that way.
I see. That's great. You have provided a ton of information about not just the process, but how what kind of the thought process is behind DCYF and how they're supporting families. Once a family is screened in, what kind of services do you offer them? Or how do you support them to, either get their kids back or to close the case?
Um, so do you mind if I give sort of a roundabout answer to get to this?
Absolutely.
And I'm making little hand gestures like you can all see me. So DCYF, we have been in the news a lot because of bad things that have happened in our agency, and we had children die. And the part of what we have learned over the years and what sort of all came to a head several years ago was that there wasn't enough staff to do the job with the numbers that were coming in the door. And then once we had families in the door, it's really hard. The services are hard to find. We don't have a lot of services. Our money has dwindled in the state of New Hampshire, and we don't have a lot of preventative resources. So families aren't getting what they were able to get 10 years ago, 20 years ago, for preventative resources that pediatricians or daycare providers or anybody is referring to. So when we get families, we had a lot of families that probably never would have come to us because there were all these preventative services that were out there and they no longer exist. So when a couple of years ago, the whole thing blew up, there was this great big report that was done on DCYF, and we were told, I don't know how many numbers of things there were that we could do to do better. And one of those things was ensuring that we had good services to refer families to. So currently we are in the process of rectifying everything that was in that report from a couple of years ago. And one of those things is our services. And so we are in the process of trying to revamp the services that are available to families, increasing them so there's more families, more services for families, and more, and not just cookie cutter services for families, because that's part of the problem. All of these families are different. And so we have to make sure we can have services for every kind of family and not just, mental health services. They shouldn't all look the same. So we're in the process of creating a lot of that. So hopefully you're going to start seeing more and more services that are available to families as we move forward. But currently we use things, we have, you hear ISO a lot, individualized service options. So we have several agencies that we can hire for open cases where they provide services. They're in the home several times a week. They have a 24-hour hotline that a family can call if they run into something in the middle of the night or on a weekend. And they provide counseling and education and visits with children. It's a really comprehensive service. And that's really what most families are getting right out of the gate for at least 90 days. And then we might drop down to what we call home-based therapy, where we have people in a couple times a week. And they do intensive therapy with families and kids, and they do it with parents alone, with kids alone, and then in different combinations for the family, whatever the family needs. The ISO level, the level that's bumped up higher, they do things like educating and filling out housing applications with people and helping people navigate how to get their Medicaid turned back on, and how to go to the grocery store and grocery shop with $50 a month, and how do you go to the food pantries to fill in that kind of stuff. So ISO is the most intense, and then home-based therapy is the next level. And those are the services that we hire out through, like Easter Seals, Waypoint, youth villages. I think those are the three big ones that we use right now. And we pay those people, and then Interestingly enough, there is a law that says that parents have to pay us back for whatever services we put into their home. So we try and be pretty careful about that because that's not really fair either. So, and parents are told that they know they have to sign paperwork with a projection of what the services might cost. Um, but we refer out to a lot of services that their Medicaid might cover. Most of the families we work with, they do have Medicaid. So we refer out to, in my area, the local mental health center is Monadnock Family Services. Or if the area agency for developmental disabilities, that might be an agency that could help support this family. So we try and refer out to services that the family can access naturally so that when we're gone, that they don't have to change services or lose their services. They will still be able to have the same services. So a lot of it is really about counseling and parenting education. In this area, we have a program called Healthy Starts that we refer to. And I think those are the big things. Does that answer the question? Because I feel like that was really long, but I wanted you to hear the whole gamut.
I think you got it. Yeah. There's, services, the preventative services aren't exactly existent currently, but
Right.
plenty of services once you're in the system. Um, Excellent. I think that's it for questions today. And I think we covered a lot about DCYF. I learned.
That's good to hear. Good to hear.
Is there any last thoughts or ideas about DCYF, or how, if you want to plug how the audience can get in touch with DCYF?
So my suggestion is this: I will give out, or actually maybe you could send my email address out to people if they can contact me via email. Um, I don't, all I have is my personal cell phone. My work cell phone doesn't work out here. And I'm not allowed to use my personal cell phone for work. Because then if any case information is used, I lose my personal cell phone. If I do any case work on here, and it will go to the court and I will never get my cell phone back. People can feel free to email me. I would highly, highly encourage you, if whatever area you are in, if you have questions, if you have concerns, call your local office in your area, and talk to them. Ask to speak to a supervisor, and tell them that you have questions or concerns, or if you want someone to come out and do a presentation more locally, or do something with a more local group, call your local office and they will help you. They're a wealth of knowledge and they are full of resources.
That's an excellent point. I think, the more we can get the word out, and local presentations is a great idea to spread the word and get involved. So I will be sure to make note of that. And like I said, that was it for questions, but I do want to thank you, Patty, for joining us and sharing your wealth of knowledge about DCYF and the system and the services that you guys provide.
Thank you so much for having me. Like I said, I love what I do. I love my job, and I like to be able to shed the positive things that DCYF does.
Absolutely. And one of those positive things I've heard is that, while reports were down, they're rising back up, that you shared. So
Yes, they are. Yes, they
it's
are.
great that we're out there and we're making sure we're protecting those children. So thank you so much to Patty, and also to our viewers today for coming in. And I want to encourage you to like and subscribe our social media accounts, and also be sure to check out your local DCYF website, or Google the Department of Health and Human Services to learn more about what they do to protect children and how you can do your part in reporting as well. And we want to encourage everybody to stay well this summer. So have a great afternoon and be well.
Thank you. Take care.